serving spiritual seekers around the world. Unity Online Radio.
Thank you for tuning in for this Unity Partner Program. Unity Online Radio partners with spiritual leaders from organizations whose mission and messages complement Unity's. We are pleased to bring you this program on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Welcome to Living on Purpose with psychology doctoral candidate Jesse Herriott from Atlanta, Georgia. Are you ready to make a switch? A switch from barely living to living on purpose. During the next hour, you will discover principles to help you live a fully functioning, conscious, and purposeful life. The all is mind, and so are you. Let's live on purpose. Now, here's your host, Jesse Herriott.
Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in to another week of Living on Purpose right here at Unity.fm, Unity Online Radio. This week we have a very special guest and a hometown favorite of mine. And on this show, folks, if you have a pen and pad, definitely take notes because this is good information to start your week off, what I call your Tuesday spiritual nutrients to help guide you along the week and to help empower you to step into what Carl Jung talked about in spiritual psychology, this phase of individuation, of becoming aligned with your essential self and your essential nature, and then from that point of alignment, then unfolding your soul's potential. This is what we're all about here when we talk about spiritual-based psychology and when we delve into the information we're talking about here on Living on Purpose. So without further ado, folks, I don't want to prolong the guest. I want to jump right in because this is an awesome guy. His name is Dr. David Ault. He's the Senior Minister of Centers for Spiritual Living in Atlanta, Georgia. And for nearly 30 years, David has traveled the world as a New Thought musician and keynote speaker and workshop retreat facilitator. And if you haven't heard his music, you have to get his CDs, and you'll get more information about that as he talks about it. Sort of pioneered this genre of positive music and vocal music and New Thought music. And if you listen now, there are a lot of musicians that are coming out now, you know, with genres of New Thought jazz and New Thought rock and things like that. But David was one of the early pioneers of this genre of music. And so, without further ado, we welcome to the program Dr. David Ault.
Hey, Jesse. How are you doing today?
Doing good, David. How are you?
Excellent. I'm glad it stopped raining. You being in Atlanta, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. The weather here is like, it's sort of like schizophrenic, you know. It's raining one moment, then you look outside, the sun's out. It's like, oh my God, what's going on? But yeah, let's jump right into it. You are the Senior Minister of a very large Center for Spiritual Living right here in Atlanta. But your background is in music. You know, you sort of pioneered, as I was telling some of the viewers, this genre of positive vocal music. Can you talk to us a bit about that in some of those early days?
Sure. When you go back into the dark ages, like 1980s, there was, you know, surprisingly, there wasn't what we understand or call positive music existing back then. Even if you looked in the New Thought movement and the churches that were involved in that, a lot of the music that was being used was hymns where the words had been changed in order to be more appropriate with the message. And ours happened, now that I think back on it, very auspiciously because I ran into a college friend of mine when I was in Los Angeles in my acting days, and he was encouraging me to come and listen to this woman speak. And I had a little bit of resistance to that, but when I finally caved in and I went, this woman was Louise Hay. And people who are familiar with the icons of New Thought are certainly familiar with Louise Hay. In fact, many people attribute her to being their starting point. And so she was hosting these weekly gatherings in Hollywood and had no music to go along with her message. And so this friend that I had connected with and a friend of his got together, and we just began to write things that had a similar message musically and thematically in order to support Louise. And there wasn't a lot of other stuff like that out there back then. And so when you consider that was not so long ago, but then when you look at the movement of New Thought music today, you see how fast it has grown. You see how necessary I believe that it is, and you see how vital it is as a genre of music. And so that was my beginnings, was composing and doing a lot of that for Louise, and then went on to create a solo career.
Mm. And where did your solo career take you? What were some of the experiences that you encountered? Because I've been receiving a lot of emails now. There are a lot of musicians that are coming along, and I know this will help them in the unfolding of their journey. Was it just within the New Thought centers? Were you traveling, or did it kind of trickle mainstream a little bit, or were you able to get some of it out there, to non-religious, people, or what was that process like for you?
Well, the process for me is that a lot of doors had already been opened for me because Louise Hay and her generosity took us with her when she hit it big with her book, You Can Heal Your Life. And so we opened for her a lot across the country. And having had that experience, I was able to go to a lot of these New Thought churches and when I was doing my solo stuff and say, hey, I was with Louise, and they remembered me. And so I was able to create tours and begin to go and recorded my own music and then would go and present it in these venues, which now is commonplace for all New Thought musicians. But back then it was still kind of cutting edge. And I was able to carve out a career doing that. But the thing about it is you had to be willing to travel. One had to be willing to get on that plane or jump in that car or do whatever it was and travel to these different churches in order to begin to offer your personal brand of music. And so back then it was still a bit of a trailblazing idea. But now it's commonplace. That's how most of these musicians get their feet wet, is in being willing to travel to the various centers and churches and conventions and workshops and retreats and things of that nature in order to provide their talent.
Mm. And I have to ask this question. Within this phase of music, since we're talking about music, as a musician, just to respect the art of music, you have to be good. Just because it's positive music doesn't mean, that you can just, that there has to be, yes, you have to be good.
Well, yeah, I mean, like anything, first of all, it's subjective in terms of what's good, because even though I think my stuff was and continues to be good, it may not be somebody else's cup of tea. However, what I'm proud to see happening is this high production quality of excellence that now permeates through the New Thought positive music genre. I mean, it's as equal to, if not better, than the production values that you see in mainstream music. And there's so many different organizations now that have gotten behind this, that are really advocating for this particular genre to be recognized in arenas like the Grammys and whatnot. So I think it's just right around the corner before something like this is really noticed by a larger number of people. Thanks to the advent of the web and all the different things in which that has created opportunity in social media. Now these artists have a much greater canvas on which to create and reach out and influence the world. But you're right. It's more than just some kind of homemade thing that you might make in your acoustic bathroom because the sound is good. I mean, these are people who are really, really going all the way in terms of production values, and this is their life. And so I'm just thrilled to see the way in which that has escalated that way.
Right, and I see it too. And with the evolution of technology, I'm seeing spoken word come in. Like I've heard Michael Beckwith see Transcendence, and there are some of his messages that some of the artists have come together and producers, and they've actually added background music to it and things like that and beats to it, and it's amazing. Some of the stuff that's out there.
Sure, and just in the time frame that I started doing it, at first I was making cassettes. And then there was oh my God, I've got to move into this foreign arena of compact disc. Will anybody buy them? And then there was that which was standard, and now again it's moved into this whole digital age. And so it's really remarkable to see the swiftness by which change takes place.
Mm-hmm. So now let's shift the conversation a bit. How did you transition from where you were within one aspect of the unfolding of your soul and sharing your gifts and talents to a more to this aspect of public service or public ministry? What was the catalyst for you, and how did you know that you had more? Because for some of the listeners that are sharing their gifts and talents but do feel that maybe I'll call it friction or frustration, or feel that impulse that there's more to them and they have more to give. What was that catalyst for you to help you, know it?
Well, I call that friction divine discontent. And that's one of the most beautiful things that any of us could ever run into, because to me, divine discontent is the catalyst for growth. And for any of us to grow, we have to become discontented with where we are. And that's not a bad thing, and it's not something to run from. It's actually something to run towards and to embrace. And so for me, it really was about Louise Hay and her message, because I had come from a fundamentalist background. And for me to hear this woman talk about the fact that wherever you are in your life, you are enough, that there's nothing to earn, that you are this beautiful expression of God, and if you never did another thing for the rest of your life, you were still worthy. That was a huge mind shift for me, coming from dogma that told me that I was born of sin. And so even though I loved what it was that I heard, you know how it is sometimes when you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. And so I could remove myself from that dogmatic background, but a lot of that still resided within me, within my DNA kind of stuff. And so for me, it was how do I go about embracing this message which feels right, but I still have some resistance to. And so for me, it was study. And I just began to take classes through Church of Religious Science, which is now called Centers for Spiritual Living, which is based on the writings of Ernest Holmes, delving into a lot of the teachings of unity and Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, and doing whatever it was that I could get my hands on regarding new thought material to begin to apply it personally, rather than just listen to it conceptually, apply it personally. And begin to take an action. So my transformation really began in a classroom and taking these classes. And the more that I took them, and the more that I began to slowly chip away from the old me and embrace a greater reality of me, going out and traveling and just doing a couple of songs suddenly wasn't enough. There was more of me that wanted to express. And so I began to examine, well, how do I take my music part and then merge that with this other part of me that wants to express even more? And so that evolved into concerts, and that evolved into workshops, and eventually that evolved into public speaking. But all the while, as I was still taking these classes, I had no desire whatsoever to become a minister. And it was just one of those things that after all these years of classes and study, which I just couldn't get enough of, here I was standing at the brink of qualifying to move on to ministerial level. And honestly, Jesse, my thought was, well, I don't want to do that, but I would still love to study. And so I just moved in to the next round of classes and personal work, again, not with the intention of becoming a minister, but just because I wanted to do it for myself. I was still going to do my music. I was still going to be involved in show business, but there you go. One thing led to another, and it was as if I didn't go out to seek it. It came and sought me and opened the door. And the next thing I knew, I was able to understand that my personal satisfaction in terms of being a creative being was far more satisfied doing the music and the new thought work and the speaking than it was in the acting. And so over a short period of time, I just sort of pulled myself out and devoted all of my attention and time into my ministerial path.
That's amazing.
And so I continued to travel, not just as a musician, but after I graduated, I traveled as a guest speaker throughout wide ranges of new thought arenas, and for many years until I am where I am today, which is sort of settled down, not touring so much, but running this big church in Atlanta.
At what point in your evolution did you notice that you were able to kind of sort of go full throttle into your passion? For some of the listeners that are, they're working that 9 to 5 and they're working on their, Clark Kent version of themselves full time and being Superman, and I hate to call it that, part of the time. At what point were you able to make that shift and focus on your passion full time and it was able to support your life? The universe was able to, orchestrate around that version of your yes. At what point did that occur in your life?
Well, it wasn't a single moment. It was a gradual moment, but Jesse, that is probably the greatest question and the most often asked question that I get, because for years a lot of New Thought musicians would come to me and they would say, well, I want to do what you do, and I'm stuck in this particular job or this particular circumstance, but I want to devote myself to this. And again, this is just my path, but what I would tell them is find a way to be at peace with what it is that you're doing, and then also go and do the other part. In other words, integrate the two. Only because of this, when it became an all-or-nothing situation for me, what began to happen was that the true intention of just being a messenger or just relishing in the joy of my talent got muddied with the trying to take care of myself and pay the bills. And so it got in the way of how I showed up from week to week across the country. And what I discovered is if I was able to go and create something for myself that would, help me do this life path and pay the things that were necessary in order to pay, I could be cleaner in my intention when I showed up for the next thing. And I think that the cleaner we are and the more pure that we are in our intention to be of service, then the things begin to shift, and the less we need to do the work that isn't necessarily the thing that brings us joy, and the more we're able to add to the mix those things that do. Because for me, the biggest thing is this: when your art becomes your job, then a lot of times that original joy that was there can get lost. And I just try to tell people, don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. Try to find a balance where you can still do these other things so that you can show up with your heart wide open And regardless of if 3 people are there or 3,000 people are there, you give your gift and you just be who you are, and then the universe provides. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. That answered a personal question even for me, and I know for those that are listening, this is definitely blessing them. I'm Jesse Herriott today, talking with recording artist, keynote speaker, and senior minister of the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. David Ault. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more in the conversation.
When listeners like you contribute to the Unity Online Radio Network, you're making a positive difference in your life and the lives of other spiritual seekers. To contribute, visit www.unity.fm and make a one-time donation or sign up for monthly contributions. Thank you for your support.
Chris Michaels, host of The Prosperous Life on Unity Online Radio, is an author, life coach, national speaker, and the founder and spiritual director of the Center for Spiritual Living in Kansas City, Missouri. Through his writing, coaching, and speaking, Chris has helped thousands of people understand the basic spiritual principles that govern our lives. In his book, Your Soul's Assignment, he reminds us that we each have something to do here on earth, a unique purpose to our lives. If you're interested in discerning what is yours to do, are looking for practical spiritual principles to inspire your life, or coaching to provide you with the tools to live more fully, visit Chris's website at www.chrismichaels.net. That's www.chrismichaels.net.
From on the air to on the sea, pack your bags and come with me. Hey, hey, what you waiting for? An early winter rendezvous with all the things you love to do. Hey, hey, treat yourself to more. A little more summer, a little more sun, a little less work and a lot more fun. A little more beach, a little more sand, a little less stress and a lot more tan.
Join your favorite Unity Online Radio hosts for Cruise in the Caribbean, November 10th to 17th, 2012. On this fun-filled Caribbean adventure, enjoy sunshine, exceptional dining, and island excursions. Feed your spirit with music, message, and meditation, plus one-on-one time with some of your favorite hosts. That's Cruise in the Caribbean, November 10th to 17th, 2012. To learn more, go to unity.fm/cruise.
A little more sunset, a little more sea, a little less do, and a lot more be. Hey, hey. Hey, hey.
You've been listening to Living on Purpose with Jesse Herriott. If you have a question or comment about today's broadcast, or if you'd like to join in the discussion, friend us on Facebook at Jesse Herriott or email us at livingonpurpose@unity.fm. Now, more Living on Purpose.
And we're back today talking with Reverend Dr. David Ault. He's a senior minister of the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, Georgia, and a powerful recording artist and keynote speaker. Reverend David, we were talking during the break about when you're in the process of creation, having this knowingness that you can't fail. Could you explain that and unpack that for some of the listeners?
Well, if you take the basic core truth that any of us on this spiritual path are asked to accept, and that truth being that it's all God, and that allness meaning you, meaning me, meaning everything, then how do we fully embody that? And the greatest way to do that is to understand that whatever you do in life, you cannot fail, because you can never escape that which is this allness of God. And when you really own that, then all of the dismantling of the fear and the unworthiness and not being good enough and the poison of comparison, all of that kind of stuff begins to really take a back seat, and you show up understanding and knowing that it's all right and perfect. And of course, that's a practice that all of us are asked to participate in. But when you do that, then wherever you show up and however you show up, in this case that we were talking about, in terms of giving your gift to the world, if you knew that you could not fail, then how would you show up? In fact, if you knew you could not fail, how would you show up in anything in life? And that, to me, is one of the most powerful things that we can adopt in our daily practice. You know, wake up every day and say, today there's no such thing as failure. I cannot fail, and so I'm not even going to entertain that possibility. So how will I show up? What will my attitude be? And a lot of that is encapsulated in one of my core statements that I make all the time, which is solution already exists. Mm-hmm. And so much of that has to do with you and I trying to wrap our heads around the fact that it's already all in alignment. That everything, I love what Ernest Holmes would say. He says that you and I create nothing because everything has already been created.
Right.
What you and I do is we simply merge into or tap into that ultimate divine infinite expression. And I look at each of us as these vehicles. We are vehicles by which this infinite, this source, this thing we call God, wants to express. And so in its wanting to express, it's really up to you and I to determine the level at which that expression will be. And if we're entertaining ideas or thoughts of unworthiness, then there's not a lot of room there for expression. But if we show up knowing we cannot fail, and we just look at those cliffs and we just jump off of them every single time, knowing that we will be provided for, then it's as if you and I are giving more and more space for that infinite nature to create. And that's why we're here. You're here, you are here, Jesse, to be the vehicle by which the infinite wants to create. And so how much room, how much space, how much liberty are you going to give that intelligence, that universal power, the space to do that?
It's like in the tarot deck, for those that look at the tarot and those psychological glyphs, there's one called the Fool, and the Fool is sort of a man or a woman, depending on what you're looking at, and they're dancing on the edge of the cliff, and they're doing a balancing act, and they have things that they're carrying with them in their bag, and all of their needs are seemingly supplied, and there's the edge of the cliff right there, but they're comfortable, you know, in that knowing it's because they're actually on the verge of creating, and they could take a step and a bridge could be built. You know, but just looking at the car from the outer, you know, understanding, it looks like, oh my God, they're about to do something and destroy themselves, you know, but they're comfortable.
Yeah, because the cliff is an illusion in and of itself, because the cliff gives boundaries. It says this is as far as you can go. And how many of us metaphorically live our lives thinking that, well, this is as far as I can go? And where did that idea come from? Was it from our domestication and our upbringing and the way in which our parents thought, or do we understand that we can live as large as we want, and that the cliff really in and of itself is illusion? I love the phrase I saw not too long ago that says the sky is not the limit. I love that because there is no limitation.
That's true. So for those that are listening that do feel stuck and stagnant and caught up in the belief of limitation, how can we shift back into alignment with that infinite source? Jung called it the self, the soul, the divine spark. It's all the same concept. How can we shift back into alignment with that?
Everything is predicated on day-to-day spiritual practice. One must want it more than they don't want it. In other words, their resolution must be in their value system, more than holding on to the old story of why they can't. And, for a lot of people that I come across, as much as they say that they want it, it's not more important than the story that helps them stay separate or small, because they believe themselves to be separate and small. So if somebody's really wanting help and saying, how do I create this bigger life, then it has to be more valuable. That quest for that bigger self has to be more valuable than the loyalty to the lack and limitation. And when that percentage point changes, and one is really serious and really authentic in that quest, then one goes about doing the spiritual practice. One goes about doing the work. I mean, think about it. If there's something that you really want, even as children, if there was something that we really wanted, we were consumed by that. We were willing to do whatever it took in order to go and make that happen. And for me, when that becomes the predominant importance, then the true work can begin. And so, like anything in life, we start with spiritual practice. And for me, the most core thing is to consider that everything out in the world is effect. It's effect, and so for that effect, there had to be a cause. And the cause was that enough people had to think the thought in order to create the world that we see out there. And the world that we see out there is changeable. I was just teaching my students a couple of weeks ago about the difference between fact and truth. And I said, tell me what a fact is. And, I got all kinds of different responses. And I said, well, how about this? I said, a fact was 150 years ago, the best mode of transportation was the horse and buggy. And I said, is that a fact today? And they said, no, of course not. And I said, so facts do what? Facts change. But truth is everlasting. And what is that truth? That truth is that everything that you and I experience is all this divine perfect order, or it's all God. And so whatever it is that you look at, if you're looking at something that appears to be chaos, you have to look at that and you have to say, okay, God is here, because the only thing that's true is God. So I get to devote myself into finding the God in this. Man, that is the jumping off point. When somebody is willing to go to that place instead of being reactive. And so the facts are the X-rays. The facts are the diagnosis. The facts are the dollars in your bank account. Those are facts.
That's right.
But the truth is that we live in a world where there's more than enough. We live in a world that is whole, complete, and perfect. And so everything is tailored upon what it is that we choose.
That's right.
So do you want to choose facts, or do you want to choose truth?
That's right. So the pure, all things are pure.
That's the practice. That's what the person, that's what I have to do every single day.
That was my question. I was going to ask you, what is spiritual practice for those that are listening? Is it a specific set of exercises, or is it no holds barred? What is considered spiritual practice?
Well, that's the basic jargon, I guess, that is used in New Thought now, is because if somebody says, what's your spiritual practice? If you look at those two words, it's just saying, what do you practice on a regular basis that helps you to remember the truth of who you are, your spirituality? What is it that you do? So, some people meditate, some people read inspirational material every day, some people listen to positive music, some people have rituals of walking through nature. Whatever it is that brings you into the alignment of your true nature, that's your spiritual practice. And the beautiful part about that is that that's always changing. You and I never do just one thing for the remainder of our lives. We'll do a certain meditation practice, and then we might move on to something else. And that's because we're evolutionary beings. And as we grow, our exploration and our desires grow. But But we must have a practice that we do on a regular basis in order to keep us in that space of remembering. The Buddhists call it mindfulness. It's anything that we do on a regular timetable to help us to tap into and move from being asleep to being awake.
Right. And I'm glad you defined it like that. So basically from that understanding, the practices in and of themselves are beautiful, but again, being open and being willing to shift because depending on the day, it may not work for you, but just because you don't get to sit in a corner and meditate for an hour, don't freak out.
Right.
It's okay,
Yeah, because and that's about being in the moment. That's about understanding just the free form of life, and that regardless of what's going on in the outer world of effect, that you and I have the capability to do spiritual practice wherever we are.
Right. And so, with that said, that leads me to my next point. Another one of your trademarks that I hear you say a lot is you stick wherever we are, and the trademark is the grass is green right where you are. How do we integrate this into our awareness during those times where we feel as if we're not enough, or we have to go out and add more things to make our lives complete? We have to, going to school and getting married and having a house and all of that is beautiful. But, there are some that, with the postmodernistic society we live in, it tells us, you have to have the big house and you have to have all these things equal success. So how do we integrate this awareness with the grass being green right where we are into our lives so that we can be more, whole and complete in our walk and in our day actions and lives?
Well, the grass is greener right here is that thing of looking at how we have a tendency to want to compare ourselves, our path, our awards, our titles to other people. And the poison of comparison is just amazing. And what we're learning is that if you can accept who you are in this moment, if you can understand that, then you begin to see the beauty of your own talents and your own gifts. I think one of the greatest ways to really understand that is to travel. So maybe you say I can't travel. But if you were to pick up and to go to a third world country, I have a school in Cambodia, and I'm in Cambodia every year, and I look at the way in which these people live, and it's a remarkable thing to come back to center and to realize how blessed we are with what we have. And when we're trapped in this poison of comparison, we have lost sight of our truth. I remember one time I wrote this little thing that said, it was called In Someone Else's Eyes. And I wrote this when I was in Cambodia, and it says, in someone else's belief, you are rich and free. In someone else's eyes, you are smart, capable, and daring. In someone else's world of existence, you have it all. In someone else's level of experience, you have already reached their understanding of nirvana. Whatever your story is, you are as blessed as you are willing to recognize that you are. And so, for me, it's really getting a grasp on this law of relativity that shows you that you have no idea how much you have. But the paradox of that, the interesting part about that is, then we're still never satisfied. And again, that's not a bad thing. When you understand that dissatisfaction is about understanding that you are dealing with the realm of the infinite. But the dissatisfaction is not about things. It's about the greater fulfillment, the greater awareness, the greater invitation to that which is that God presence within us. It's not about the accumulation of things. It's about being the greater vehicle for love, for truth. And so we're never satisfied with that, but we are certainly satisfied and taken care of with whatever the earthly things are.
Right. And what helped you to reach that point in your life, in the unfolding of your journey?
To me, it was travel. To me, it was seeing the world. It was going out into the world and looking at, in third world countries and seeing how they operate and how they live, and seeing the joy in their simplicity. And then coming back and realizing how truly blessed I was, and what was I worrying about, or why was I getting so swallowed up into the comparison of what other people were doing. I mean, I see people beat themselves up in their spiritual practice because they don't think that they're doing it right. And I said, it's not a question of doing it right.
Right.
It's just a question of simply doing it and allowing yourself to learn in the process.
Right. Right, and you said a mouthful when you mentioned about the joys and simplicity. And yeah, I can definitely concur, because I know folks that get upset because they can't quote a Hebrew language or a Greek language or whatever. But, just the simplicity of the moment and your attempt to, you still get the same effect, even if you're not saying it the same way they said it 100,000 years ago or whatever.
Right.
This is amazing. And on that note, I have to take a quick commercial break. I'm Jesse Herriott today, folks, talking today with Dr. David Ault. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more conversation. Living on Purpose.
There is peace.
Have you ever experienced the silence? If you're someone who balks at the idea of spending extended time in silence, and the very thought of it makes you say, I could never do that, then we have the perfect retreat to make a convert of you. Join Reverend Paulette Pipe for the Touching the Stillness Retreat, October 4th through the 7th, 2012 at Unity Village.
Being in the silence is easier than you think and more rewarding than you can imagine. Beginners and advanced meditators alike will be enriched as together we co-create a safe, sacred environment that incorporates just the right amount of soul-nourishing prayer and meditation practices to usher us deeper and deeper into the silence. Not only will you likely achieve a transformative experience of the divine, but once you've touched the stillness, you may wish for even more time to hush and listen.
Reverend Paulette Pipe, host of the Touching the Stillness program on Unity Online Radio, invites you to explore the silence with her during the Touching the Stillness Retreat, October 4th through the 7th, 2012. Make your reservation for this retreat now. Go to touchingthestillness.org and click on Calendar. That's touchingthestillness.org.
There is hope that is growing.
You've been listening to Living on Purpose, where psychology meets spirituality. Now, here is your host, Jesse Herriott.
I'm having an exciting time, folks, in the conversation with Dr. David Ault. He's the Senior Minister of the Centers for Spiritual Living right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And if you missed the show, go back and download it again. In fact, you can download all the archives. Log on to unity.fm and click on Program Archives and click on the show. Download all of them for your library. This is good material. It's good for your soul. Now, Dr. David, as a spiritual leader, kind of sort of have it's really one question, but there's a second part to it. How do you define spirituality? And with spirituality, are there any character evolving aspects to it that help mature parts of our shadow? Because you hear a lot of things from spiritual people, and you hear about the scandals that come out and the dark, murky, ugly stuff that's connected with some of them. How do you define spirituality, and does that spirituality help evolve other parts of us other than just the part of us that we want to be spiritual, if you understand what I'm trying to say?
Well, I think the truth, again, going back to what's true, the truth of us is that we are spiritual beings. And I even had a Hindu gentleman in New York a couple of months ago plant an idea in my brain when he said, we often say that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and he said, but I would like to concur that we're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. That everything is a spiritual experience because everything is God. I love that. So my definition of spirituality is just the walking the path of our truth. And when we're walking that path, there are moments when we are fully awake, and there are moments when we have drifted back to sleep. I mean, think about it. When you get in the car sometimes and you start the engine and you're on your destination, how many times have you arrived at that destination and you were someplace else? Yeah. Meaning that mentally you can't recall how you got from point A to point Z because your mind was on other things. And I think that's a perfect example of our spiritual walk, our life path, is that sometimes we have drifted off into this unconsciousness, and sometimes we're fully awake. And the goal, to me, is to simply remain awake more than we go to sleep. As Rumi, the poet Rumi would say, don't go back to sleep. And I think what I've discovered, you mentioned the scandals and the this and the that among the world. What I have come, and this is just my personal take on it, is I realize that I'm not here to police the universe. Right. That what I'm here to do is to be the best that I can be, and that regardless of what anyone else has done or how that's labeled as being a fall from grace, that there's a quality about that if you took away the specific act and you just looked at what was the emotion or what was the feeling behind that caused them to do those things, then that basic feeling, whether it was fear, whether it was unworthiness, whether it was anger, we have all had those experiences. And so I look at it this way. For me to judge another person because they operated out of fear is hypocritical, because I too have operated out of fear. For me to judge somebody because of what they did from a place of anger and hatred is hypocritical, because I too have felt the feelings of anger and hatred. And so it's a call more than anything for me to understand. Not condone, that's a completely different thing. Not to condone the action, but to understand it. And when I am able to understand it, then all that really provides for me to do is to live more excellently, to live more in integrity by looking at the ways in which our world falls asleep. And so to me, it's not about finger pointing, but it's about taking responsibility. Because if you think about it, if we're all connected, you know how we all toss around the idea, we're one, everybody's one. Well, then if I'm one with everybody, then I'm one with the person who has committed that heinous crime.
That's true.
I'm one with the person who has embezzled. I'm one with the person who has cheated. I'm one with the person who has betrayed. And I really have to look at that, and I have to say, what part of me has those qualities and elements in it? And to take that quality and that element and somehow find a way to dissolve it with the only thing that is true, and that is love.
Yeah.
It's so easy. It's so easy to get seduced into the world's rallying cry about somebody being wrong. I look at even something like our own government and the division that takes place within our presidents and the way in which we view things. And I say to myself, when was the last time that division was brought right into my face, And my first response was to pray for both sides.
Mm-hmm.
When that becomes my first response, rather than taking a side, then I know that I've gotten somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Then I know that I'm really fulfilling being this vehicle for the infinite to create. And I still have to work on that because I'm not always successful with that. But that's at least what I'm striving to do. So to me, to be that vehicle of God is my spirituality. That's my purpose.
Wow.
That's anybody's purpose.
And what's your responsibility from that awareness to those that you love and those that love you that may not share your vein of thought, per se? What's your responsibility to them? How do you, I hate to say have more patience because it sounds like, I'm already hinting at a possible answer, but, how do we cultivate a better relationship with them? Does your spirituality separate you from them, or does it make you want to bring them, closer to you, and as long as they're not disrespecting you?
Mm-hmm. Well, please don't confuse seeing the truth or the divinity in another person as meaning that you have to have lunch with them or even have them in your life, because it's vital that every single person surround themselves with a support system or people who are in alignment with their core values.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we look down upon somebody else just because they think differently than us, but you certainly don't want to be doing battle every single day with somebody who's wanting to berate you or debate you on what it is that you believe. It's not about debate. It's about just simply standing in your truth. And so it's one of the most loving things that you can do for yourself and for that other person is to perhaps love them from a distance.
Yeah, that's true. This has been an exciting conversation, folks. You're listening to Dr. David Ault. And if you missed the show again, please go back and download it. The show is available in MP3 format, and it's also compatible with any device you have. And you can also download apps to listen to the show while you're driving. You can download it to your smartphone. Dr. David, your work and your teachings and your music, how can we get a hold of your work?
Well, it's pretty easy. You can just go to davidault.com, and Ault is spelled AULT, and there's pretty much everything on there, everything from my book and my music to my work in Cambodia. I take people to Cambodia with me every year, and I call it a voluntour, and you get to come and be with the beautiful people and the children that are in the school over there, and it's just an incredible opportunity for you to expand your horizon. Hopefully the news page is up to date, and it shows where I'm going to be. I'll be at Unity Village in July, hosting the Adult Unity week-long annual retreat this year, so this is my first time to be the big key facilitator, so I'm looking forward to that. That information is on the website, and then I will be in Geneva, Switzerland this summer, also in August, participating in a New Thought conference, where I'm just so happy to say that New Thought is exploding in Europe for the first time in a long time. So it's really exciting to be a part of that.
Yes, this is amazing. And Dr. David, thank you so much for coming on the show and blessing us with the transformative work and through your music and your teachings and all your contributions to New Thought and the human potential movement as a whole.
Thank you.
No problem. And thanks so much, folks, for tuning in to Living on Purpose at Unity.fm radio this week, the Voice of an Awakening World. This program is made possible by the generous support of listeners like you. In order to sponsor this broadcast, log on to www.jesse.herriott.com and click on donate. All proceeds will be forwarded to Unity Online Radio to help keep this individual program on air. And if you would like to donate to Unity as well, log on to unity.fm and click on the donate button as well to help keep the program as a whole going, because it's a powerful network, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. Lift someone, laugh a lot, and definitely remember to live on purpose. Peace and blessings.
Thank you for tuning in to Living on Purpose, where psychology meets spirituality with Jesse Herriott. Listen in live every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central Time for more insights into psychology, ancient wisdom, and how it connects to your life today. Living on Purpose, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world. This program is brought to you in part by www.jesseherriott.com, where psychology meets spirituality. Connect with us on Facebook and YouTube. Keyword search Jesse Herriott.
Just what does that dream mean? Ever wake up from a crazy dream and wonder what it meant? Have you had a recurring dream all your life and you just can't get it to stop? Get all your questions about dreams and dream interpretation answered by the leading expert in the field. Unity Online Radio is home to America's leading dream expert, Dr. Michael Lennox. And on Mondays at 2 p.m. Central, the Dream Doctor is definitely in. Tune in to Dream Interpretation with Dr. Michael Lennox, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Inspiration only takes a moment. We invite you to consider these words from Unity author Charles Roth. Live deeply in the present moment. If you are going to work on the premise that real energy, real excitement, that feeling of being fully and enthusiastically alive comes from a source within you, then it follows that you have to spend some time getting acquainted, being at home in those far reaches of inner space. Peace is power, for out of stillness, strength is born, and out of inner harmony, productivity flourishes. Rest in that inner peace.
This meditative moment is brought to you by Unity.
Do you experience the peace and joy promised by A Course in Miracles? Or are you still struggling to truly live your beliefs from moment to moment? Let Reverend Jennifer Hadley help you focus on your intent to be the love, be the peace through practical application by walking your talk. Experience the healing live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central on A Course in Miracles, Living the Love, Walking the Talk. Only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
What is the secret to happiness? Why do bad things happen to good people? What is our purpose in life? What must I do to bring healing into my life? Join Reverend Paul Hasselbeck every Tuesday for a metaphysical romp. Explore fundamental unity principles put into action through real-life scenarios from people like you. Call him with your questions and spiritual challenges, and let Paul take you on a journey of profound personal understanding and transformation. That's Metaphysical Romp with Reverend Paul Hasselbeck every Tuesday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.